Citation Committee doctorate proposal with Dr. Kelly and Dr. Block. Continuing the meeting.
I don't know, but it's asthma or whatever, so it's very hard for me to talk.
Okay.
So I want you to do most of the talking, believe it or not, to kind of get us to know where you are with your research and what we need to understand how you're going forward. For example, we were talking about previously just the question between, I had it, do you still want to do, we're going to give you some choices, an ethnographic study just looking at your school and talk about the archival data in terms of student retention, teacher retention, changes to the program, your program, or do you want to do a analysis, as you say in chapter 1, look at some of the how principals are not prepared even with all the support they get from the DOE. Because you really have, am I right? You really have two forks in the road. And I don't want you to have those two forks. We need to have clarity in what you want to do. And so the ethnographic, what we talked about before, with archival data could be your choice still. Or you can look at principles and talk about the innovation based on 4 principles that you want to interview. So those are your 2 caveats. Is that clear? Go ahead.
Right, and my addition is what we were talking about before, which is that I'm not aware of any research approach that permits the researcher to essentially comment on his own behavior and his own performance without any independent evidence. If there is, I want to see it, because I'm not opposed to it if there's something that says you're allowed to do that, but I've not seen it in any of my work over the years. It reads, as I say somewhere, it's self-serving. I mean, it's not, and I grant, I would, because I know you and I believe that it's all true, but it can't be allowed to stand by itself. There has to be some way to corroborate all the conclusions you make, all the facts that you cite about what happened. I mean, that's a general point of view, and then the question is the direction. I mean, how do you once if you have a and I was saying that if you've got and I think you said you brought some of it. If you've got outcome data that shows impressive growth during your years there, I mean, that's worthy.
That's the archival stuff.
Of being a fundamental that leads to something else. You could make the point that, and again, if you could get if you had memos or emails or some independent source of what happened during your tenure, what you did that was different. Or you could say that's the study. The study is we have all of this easily obtainable outcome data shows that the school went from here to there, and what you want to study is to get the perspective of other stakeholders on how that happened, and let them talk about your role.
Well, that's the first thing. But that's what he wanted to do.
Initially, that's what it was.
He wanted to interview the teachers, the students,
Right.
and say, during this reign, what were perceptions, what
Right.
were the turnovers, and what were the changes?
Well, in fairness, you couldn't do that interview, and you'd have to hire somebody.
we talked
about
Yeah.
that.
And I apologize for not being part of this for the last year. I mean,
But that's why I wanted to call everyone together.
I mean, because
Excuse
to me that if you have the data that shows gains that are impressive, that are clearly more than the ordinary, then the question is why, right? I mean, that's the big question. What happened that produced that? And you get that from, I think, from a series of interviews or maybe even just a survey. I mean, we'd have to talk that out. But.
Well, because I want to be, my issue is this. When we first started doing this, you told me to write about everything that I did at the school. So that's where that came from. You know, it wasn't self-serving. It was directed.
Because I wanted him to
She
brainstorm.
wanted me to write about
Right.
what did you do, what were the strategies, what were the communication strategies. That's all that was in there.
Fair enough.
All right. So then we shifted from that to, so we were going to do that. Then, so that was the narrative, and then the design would be the 3 different stakeholders, parents, students, teachers, their perspective of what happened, and then to see does their perspective align with the narrative that was introduced. But now I'm kind of, I feel like pressed for time. So when you had said to me, you know, let's look at what other principals have done and interview those principals, and because initially we had the stakeholders, and then we had then we had a group A, which was the stakeholders. Then we had B, which was the principals
Right.
of similar schools, to see what were their challenges and what were the strategies that they implemented.
Right.
So I think I want to start from, I want to do it in teaching is what we call backwards planning.
Okay.
So I have data that shows all the middle schools in the district that I was in, and how from year to year my school started off as second to last, and then outperformed all the other middle schools. And not only did they outperform them, but every year
Right.
there was growth
Right.
from where it started. So if you look at 2002 to 2003, there's like a certain performance indicator in the state assessments.
Right.
So then 03, 04, and you see improvement. And you didn't see the same rate of improvement in the other schools.
And what reports do you have access to from the district or the state?
Well, this is the state.
That comment, no, reports, more than just data, that commented on, because they were clearly, I mean, the whole question of middle school improvement is a big deal, as you rightly point out, and there isn't enough of it, clearly, and so here's a middle school that seems to be doing better than the norm. I mean, are there any reports that identify your school as?
Well, can I just ask, since this is new to me, what kind of reports, are you saying that they give you quantifiable reports, and then they have things that have comments?
Well, sure, because, I mean, part of the whole No Child Left Behind stuff is what kind of, how does the state or the district assess the school, and therefore what kind of change process must it undergo, right? I mean, there's all kinds of requirements. I mean, Ron Gonzalez is doing a study of the different, there are 4 different models that state used for high schools. And so that's, my question is whether there's been any reports citing your school for its atypical growth?
The only reports that we get is the New York State report card.
Okay.
Which has like
It's spoken
data,
but
and it's,
but does it not?
It has-
Does it not say something substantive about the school? Does it not have any? Does it not locate the school on some continuum of performance?
it says stuff like if you're in good standings, if you're still a school in need of improvement.
Exactly.
Then it gets integrated with the school comprehensive education plan.
Right.
And they
Right.
want to know, like, did you make growth from year to year? Are you on point? Stuff like that.
Right. And the question is, I mean, all I'm asking is, given the data that you have, was there any recognition at the state level that the school was doing?
The state doesn't do that. The state just gives the rankings.
Right, but don't you rank better because of what you did?
Yeah, you're either well, when I was there, you were either a SUR school
Right.
into registration and review,
Right,
a CINI school, which we started off as, which is a school in need of improvement,
Right.
And if you get out of that, you become a school in good academic standings.
okay.
And
And you hadn't gotten there yet? Or you
we had gotten to.
You did get
my
there.
last year. We got to school
Well,
in
it's
good academic
fabulous. I mean, that
standings.
should be, I didn't see that. Did I see that in your?
I talked about the CINI, but I didn't know when we were going to integrate all this data piece. I didn't know if it should be integrated in chapter 1 or if it's something that should be talked about. I didn't know where to talk about that.
Fair enough.
So I've been holding this data for a minute.
Okay.
So there's,
Okay.
so like, this is what I brought here today. I have, hold on. This is, this folder right here is the school comprehensive education plan. And so, this one goes back to but I think it's the kind of stuff that you're talking about. It charts the demographics of the school, the ELLs, excuse the coffee, I was, but it has all the information as to where we are in each particular category. So that was like, I think, my second year at the school, where we started to make progress. And then with that data,
What years are we talking about?
2003 to 2007.
This is 2003 to
This one right here is 2000, I think, 5 to 2006.
So you were there 4 years?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, this has language that to the lay reader is incomprehensible. Right? So I mean, I'd have to really digest all of this to figure out what the numbers mean. But you'll do that, right?
Yeah, and I can do the
You'll create
definition of terms
some way to. Because the real question is, I mean, what percentage of kids are at or exceeding the standard, right? That's set for the measure, whether it's math or reading. Or English, rather.
But I think this is a simpler form, and you can, let me just show. Yeah, this is my level, and this is year for each year. So if you look at this is my school, 109, grades 6, 7, and 8. And this is 1999, 2000, 2001, 2002. And you'll see what my levels were in terms of, this is
before you're there.
This is before I'm there, but it goes into 2002, 2003. So you see that in 2001, our level of students that had 3s and 4s in reading was 18.3%.
Right.
And then when you go to 2002, it goes to 22%, then it goes up to 23, 28, then to 37. And that's by 2005. So you see that from year to year, it's growing. And then I have another sheet that shows where we are in comparison to other schools within the district.
That's a very important piece of data.
So to me, this is longitudinal because you're going from year to year. But then there's comparative data between myself and other schools.
Right.
Where was I at in 2002? Where were other schools at?
Right.
Where was I in 2003? Where were other schools at?
Absolutely.
So you see me beginning to outpace my similar schools. And we all had the same, we were all under the same district, we were in the same region, we all had the same
resources.
and we also had the same reform design packet,
Right.
in terms of what needed, because we were all city schools, we were a city district,
Right.
which was a school needed improvement.
Right.
So we all had pretty much the same kinds of kids, same population, similar mandates from the district and suggestions from the district, but this school moved quicker than others. And it wasn't like this school was at the top and then continued to be at the top. This school was here and went here, went here, went here, went here. So what happened at this school that was different? That's
the question.
What was happening at the school.
I'm with you. That seems to me to be right, and this data seems to me to be your anchor. And this is not you waxing eloquent about all the specific changes you made. This is you demonstrating outcome data that's state approved, and you can't quarrel with. I mean, it's there, right? But on both levels, both the yearly progress and the comparative data.
Yeah.
That to me is persuasive. And then and it's stuff I've done. I've done all that kind of work in my career, and so. So the question always is, if you were to do a school quality review kind of analysis, and you've heard that term.
Live with it.
Right. If you were to do a school quality review, it would give you all the factors that are alive and well in that school, and you could do that and ask, and either do a survey or do a series of interviews and get lots of reactions about why. You know, what happened during that time frame that led to these outcome data? To me, that's a study.
Okay, but let me ask you, Dr. Kelly. Because
I know.
after hearing all of this, now, is there any way to do this exactly what Dr. Block said, except how you had kind of like structured it, and you were talking about comparing it with the strategies
Of other
of the
principals?
principles, and what I thought in my mind was like, what kind of research questions would that mean?
Right.
Like, would it mean I would ask them what were their challenges, their strategies, their plans, or their vision and their concerns, or like
This goes to my first question again. In the sake of your time,
because that's what we look. That's what I'm.
we're
In a
looking,
real world, that's the study you're talking about is the one I want. But in the constraints of what I'm trying to get done, I need to consider other options. You understand what I'm saying?
Go ahead.
so he has two options. The ethnographic that looks clearly about the growth and the changes in one school, or does he look at the school in comparison to the other schools in that district? In terms of comparative data, that's what we're looking at. So he was going to interview other principals and say, what were some of your creative approaches outside of.
What did you do that failed to measure up to what I did?
Yeah.
No, I wouldn't base it that.
I know you would, no, but just between us. I mean,
Yeah.
that's essentially what, I mean, if you've got airtight data that shows, in fact, you grew faster and your level, and you leapfrogged other schools and became clearly a higher performing school as a result of what happened during that time frame. And if you then were to go to interview the other principals, you'd want to compare what they did to what you did, and then you'd want to, I think, and then you'd want to make some, your chapter
Right.
5 would be a whole bunch of comments about the
recommendations,
differences,
right.
But I wouldn't even want so I have 4 principals right now, because right, I have 2 principals who were in the district, and during that time. Then I have 2 principals who weren't in the district at the time, and this is important. They're currently principals, and they're dealing with race to the top, Common Core,
Right.
and the challenges of today.
Right.
And so I think to make my study significant, it would be to ask those principals what they did, and ask these principals what are they doing and what are their challenges.
But don't forget, your data is only from 2003 to 2007.
Yeah. No, but what I'm saying is,
Okay.
along the lines of comparing and contrasting, or just what I'm saying. Okay, let me tell you my assumption. My assumption is that principals today are still struggling, still receive very little support,
Right.
still have to try, especially in the urban school settings, still have to try to meet these mandates, and are not being given the how-to in terms of doing it.
Or still enough resources. And it's not
Yeah,
like-
the resources and the how to.
Right, right.
And this is the world that I live in. Like, these are the discussions
Absolutely.
that I have. So my thing is that if I look at, okay, so race to the top was, No Child Left Behind was supposed to bring us to the standards, and it failed. All right.
Right.
Race to the Top is now saying the same thing. Yet there's a lot of, and I talk about this in my, there's a lot of pushback from teachers. There's a lot of concerns about that we're over testing, and there's a lot even more pressure on principals now than there was when it was No Child Left Behind. So the question becomes, how does a principal with dealing with all of these things still make progress? And I think it's significant because right now their jobs depend on it.
Right, but here's.
So my question is
Right.
that when we was talking about interviewing principals, like, I would like to interview someone like Angela and say, hey, you're in it right now. What are your strategies? What are your approaches? What are you doing? How are your challenges?
Right.
So that we're looking at this school, saying this school found something to do. Now, that doesn't mean that this is going to apply to every school,
Right.
but it's something that schools today might want to look at and apply in a way that makes sense for them.
Here's my problem. The only thing that you have airtight, is the outcome data. You don't have airtight what happened in your school, because all you have is your assertions about what happened in your school.
Okay, now let me ask you a question.
Yeah.
Research, right? Is there a way to, or is this just not done, if there's periodicals and things that were written about the school, but it wasn't scholarly, but it was people talking about the school at that time in real time.
So you're talking about newspaper clippings?
Newspaper article.
Sure.
That's still-
Because
that's still
is
there.
that a way to assert, to make it not about my assertions?
If it specifically talks about specific initiatives that you've commented on, absolutely.
And I have some that I didn't make copies of. I mean, that I can send you, that I emailed it to myself. Wait a minute, let's pull out.
I mean, the problem is, this is fine. I mean, you could certainly use this for a couple of specifics, but you have a host of specific findings of fact and conclusions throughout your chapter 1. And wherever I've pointed it out, and there's probably even more than I pointed out, because I got tired of saying the same thing, which is, what's the evidence, right? And so, which is why I keep coming back to, we may have, it may be that we differ a little bit, and we should talk it out with you. Because for me, the simplest study that you could do, given what we have in front of us, is, okay, you've got all this outcome data that's airtight, that's clearly from the state, so there's no question about its validity. What you don't have is, how did it happen? You've got your theory, your personal, you've got your assumptions about the work that you did that you think led to it, but you don't have any independent evidence. And to me, the study could be gathering that independent evidence by interviewing parents, kids, and teachers from that period. And again, I'm enough not a methodology person to be able to say without question it should be interviews versus a survey. I'd want you guys to, and maybe others, to weigh in on that question. But it does seem to me that would be the simplest thing for you to do. You're starting with all this interesting data, outcome data, and that could be just, that's the context. You could certainly set up the school in both in terms of its demographic data and all of that, right, as part of your chapter 1 discussion of context.
So in the chapter 1, I can embed this data that I have here.
Absolutely.
As I'm writing about.
Absolutely.
The if I say improvement as evidenced by.
Absolutely.
And as reflected in.
Absolutely.
And then pull out and extrapolate the data right up front.
And you can also use, and should use, Michael Fullen is one of my heroes, so you knew that, but I think you could use certainly some change theorists, particularly education change theorists, as your theoretical rationale. And then the question is to what, so then when you look at and you interview people or survey people, what you're looking for is to what degree did your work conform to these change theories, A, and B, can you link the improvement in student performance and teacher performance too, because if students are performing better, it means teachers are performing better, right? And it's part of the mix that we're talking about. And if you get all that from the interviews or from the survey, then you got your answers. You've got enough answers to be able to say how much you conform to some of the theories of change in schools, and you've got some answers to the question, well, what actually happened in your school that produced this impressive gains? And I'd be curious, since then, because you've now been out 6-7 years, 8 years, what's happened to that school since? Has it gone backwards?
Yes.
Okay, well, that's important to show too.
Can you get that information to show? Okay.
Well, it's political and it's kind of.
No, this data is not political.
No. She's asking because I don't have access to
The New York State report since he's left.
since he's left, like where they are in terms of and I don't know if. Let me see. I had this
Did
one.
anyone get access to this data?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, I mean, first of all, it's the report card data, for one thing. I mean, it may not be organized quite the way you had it when you got it, but you certainly can see, for example, what percentage of kids are scoring 3 and 4 in the third and fourth group, right? And you see how it's grown when you were principal, and if it's gone backwards since then, that's easy to show because you could.
Yeah, but the only thing is that the time from the time I was there until I left, it was the same testing instrument, and that has changed.
So then.
So it's a new test.
So
you understand what I'm saying? So
Sure.
how can I say
because
measuring?
because the comparative data corrects for that. In other words, the question is, it's both. The absolute data is what percentage of kids are now scoring in these higher quartiles, right? And that's the third and fourth groups. And because it's a different test, it's a harder test, and so one has to account for that sometimes. Although after 7 or 8, well, when did they change the test? Was it 13?
They changed it with
Was it 13 or before then?
before then. It was changed with
Because I remember New York City plummeted when they did that.
yeah, wasn't it 212?
It may have been 212, because Bloomberg was touting how good
Yeah.
things were, and then the new test showed that
And
the
everybody
data
flatlined.
was pretty lousy.
Yeah.
But my point is that what should hold true is that all the schools were affected similarly. So if you had brought the school up to be much higher than second from the bottom, or whatever it was when you first took over, and the question is where does the school rank
Today.
today, right? And is it still up there, which would undermine some of your thinking because you'd have differently, or has it plummeted? Is it back down to one of the worst performing middle schools in the area? And that's data that you should try to get a hold of, because that would be really important to make your initial case, which was that there was this unqualified success during this time frame, and the question is, and it hasn't continued, and the question is why? And that's what I think you could find out, and probably get, since I have no doubt believing all of your assertions, what you'll get essentially is people corroborating that. You'll get students and teachers and parents from that period saying, we love this, we thought this helped, teachers were more cooperative, they were working together better, there was more emphasis on interesting curriculum for the kids. That's one of the consequences of your emphasis on hip-hop, is that we know that high interest curriculum is a good thing, particularly in urban schools, right? And that's kind of what you were working on. So there's a bunch of ways you can get information that shows how and why you were able to do what you did.
Okay, so then this comes back to you again. So to make your life easy, you can still go back to what you originally have and do the ethnographic, or you can, and I don't know, maybe at this point why, but look at the principles. Which one, in terms of time, I think that the ethnographic is easier for you.
Well, this is what I'm saying. So then we would just looking at the stakeholders in that community
In that school.
and asking them. And so, that to me, I can,
Yeah.
So it's ironic. I just left, unfortunately, when the former teacher passed, and so I just last night bumped into a whole bunch of all my former teachers, and they were, and I was sitting there going, I wish I had a tape recorder, because they were sitting there running down to me everything that was and what they missed, and I was like,
they miss you.
yeah, basically,
Yes, I totally get that.
and I was like, but they were talking about the one teacher was very specific about, remember when you had this program, and remember when you had that program.
See, that's where we need-
And I said, that teacher's a person who.
Do you have contact with her?
Yeah, I said, but at the time, I'm thinking, well, I'm not gonna be interviewing you anyway.
Right.
Because.
I think in the sake of time, going back to the original title, ethnographic, looking at parents, students, administrators, and you don't have to do a lot. We're not asking what.
The parents, students, teachers.
Teachers.
Oh, I'm sorry, parents, student, teachers.
Yeah,
Why did I say administrators?
because you think about the principals, the class.
Yeah.
I mean, the one thing, the one reason why I think interviewing gets you in more in-depth information, that's true. And also, and you're more experienced than me than this, and so this is a question for you as well, which is, wouldn't it be the case that IRB, in order to get a survey approved by IRB, you gotta make it reliable and valid.
Of course.
You gotta do a trial run of it. You gotta have some way in which you can demonstrate the validity of that as well. Whereas if you do it, interviewing, you can talk about the kind of topics that you want to interview, and you can talk about the importance
Right.
of being able to be flexible, because you want to follow up with questions when you're interviewing somebody based on what they're saying, right? My sense is that it's easier to get IRB approval when you're interviewing than
Yeah,
a survey.
right,
Is that?
right, it is.
Yeah.
I don't know if it has to do with the people who are on the committee right now, but they all seem to be more qualitative than quantitative.
Oh.
So this will serve you best.
So then, the only hump that I have is how do I, and I'm talking about time management,
Wait.
having someone,
So here's
training
where Andrea,
someone.
but here comes where Angela comes in. Because what you can do to bring validity and reliability to your questionnaires, your questions, is circulate your interview questions to principals.
Oh, well, certainly you could do that.
And that will validate your questions.
But that, you wouldn't do that if you're doing interviewing. That's if you do a survey.
Well, that's true too, but but my thought was, if your question is what kind of questions would you ask?
No, my question is, how
Oh.
do I, in a timely manner, because I just don't, I have to train somebody to, I won't be able
That's
to
right.
conduct these interviews. And then I have.
Positionality.
Exactly, and so then I would have to train somebody to know what to ask in reference to, that's
Here
time,
comes-
that's a time-consuming process,
Well, you're.
to make sure that they got it, so I'm getting good data back.
Let me also, however, I have a student who, in fact, I mean, I don't think this is, students' topics are not confidential, so I can say. She's in there, Stephanie, is interviewing teachers that
Excuse me.
she worked with in the past, and doesn't need to have somebody else do it. If you were
She did it? She's doing it?
Yeah, if you were principal now, you couldn't interview them, because
Okay.
you would have direct, control over their work lives, right?
Yeah, that would raise a red flag.
But it's 8 years ago.
So if I speak to former teachers, former students, former parents,
What do you think?
You'll be okay.
and if I just
You'll be
acknowledge,
okay.
if I acknowledge my
Right.
positionality,
Right.
Right,
in the
right.
writing to
As a
say
researcher.
that this,
Absolutely.
Yes.
yeah.
So I think we can dispense with that.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
and that makes it,
Yeah.
okay,
So that's easier.
That's easier.
okay.
But I do think that you need to pay attention to both the comments that we both made to you about your writing and about your organization, and really work on, making sure everything flows and everything is logical and follows from one another. And I mean, for example, your review of the literature was too anecdotal and too, you talk more about the situation than you did about the theory. And so, and I make that comment.
So do you just want me to talk specifically about the theory? Because I
Well,
was trying to
technical-
integrate.
Right. So for
Because one time I
example,
wrote it separate, but I was told, no, integrate the theory into,
Well, you have to set the theory out, and then
Right.
sure, you can talk about why you think it's important for the
Right.
theory to be observed and to determine the degree to which you actually were able to follow the theory in the work that you did as the leader of the school.
so if you were looking at this, of course you summarize this theory. But then the question becomes, how is this integrated, or how does this relate to your work?
Right.
Right? What are you pulling out that's important to now your research and the way that you see your research?
so let me just, because I want to simplify it. So step one.
Okay.
Step one is summarize the theory, right?
Well, not step one, so, I mean, of the theoretical foundation.
For the literature review part.
Oh, well, okay, well, the literature review is more than just a review of the theories. It's a review of studies about urban literature.
Okay, so we're talking about the theoretical rationale.
If we're just talking about
Yes,
the theoretical.
in chapter one.
In
Okay.
chapter one, right.
So step one is to kind of give a brief synopsis of the theory.
Of the theoretical rationale, yes, okay.
Theory of theoretical
I mean,
rationale.
because if we're talking about chapter one, where, there's other stuff that comes first.
No, I'm talking about in the theoretical rationale section.
Right.
Step one, in the theoretical rationale
Absolutely.
section.
What's the theory
Is to
say?
give the synopsis of
Absolutely.
the
Major
theory.
theories.
I'm not gonna go too deep in that, because I'm gonna go
No.
further in chapter
Right.
two.
Exactly.
All right, so after I
Exactly
give,
right.
okay, so after I give that synopsis.
Right.
Then I write and talk about how that theory applies to the study.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so in doing that, I'm not talking, because I'm just trying to understand what your criticism was. When I did that, I thought I did that, you're saying I didn't.
Right.
Okay, tell me exactly what, can you give me an example of how it should have looked?
Yeah, the conversation was, well, one thing you can do is look at somebody's dissertation. I mean, let me see, what do I say about that? I think I say just, actually, I think my first criticism of it is right up top. Much of what is written under the heading of theoretical foundation is really contextual statement of the problem information. In other words, the statement of the problem is a separate, as you know, category, right? And that's where you have to lay out all the specifics
Right.
of what's going on, what was going on in the school, the demographics, the prior data, the data that obtained under your tenure, and the data that's been going on since then. That's all this, as the statement of the problem. And then the theoretical foundation is what are some leading thinkers established as a theory of change for a school like the one you were leading, right? And Fullen is a person, and you might, you could do one or two others. I don't think you have to, you don't have to go everywhere. Although you might want to do in your literature review in chapter 2. You may want to at least cite, as many of the authors as you can find who have similar kinds of theoretical work to identify. And anyway, so you get to your questions, and one of your question is to what extent, without typing it out and thinking about it, I can't be sure of my language, but one of your questions is the relationship between your work and the theory of change, and a good theory of change, or any theory of change. And secondly, what were the practical things that were done in the school that stakeholders believe were effective in helping the school grow as an academic and helping kids learn more?
So you're talking about, these are the research questions?
Yeah, and so there's at least a couple of research questions, and maybe as you're thinking about it, you may develop one or two more out of that.
I would suggest, though, for IRP purposes, don't go crazy with your research questions.
Right.
Make sure that no more than 4 or 5.
Right.
You can always, as you're interviewing, insert other questions
Okay.
to kind of elicit more dialogue. But for IRP, make it 4 or 5. Don't go crazy.
And no more, but even less, even
Yeah.
3 if you
Yeah, yeah.
Right, I totally agree with that. And remember, the other thing is that once you get our approval on your proposal and you're off to IRB and you get approved there, you can always modify
Yeah,
1 to
after.
3. And in fact, you should, because you're going to modify it in relationship to what you're picking up in the research, and especially because we've obviously concluded that you could do the research because you're no longer there. So you're going to have, real access to the dynamic
Yep.
between you and the stakeholders.
Okay, so with this data that I have now.
Yes.
When I go back, should this be integrated into what I was writing about in chapter 1?
Yes.
Yeah.
So now when I say school improvement or what have you, I base it upon and I cite the
Absolutely,
date.
cite that.
That's right.
And I like to see you to put a table in there.
I was thinking like a
Absolutely.
table like this that shows
Yeah.
from year to
Yeah.
year.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right, and another one that shows the comparative growth,
Yeah.
how
With
it
the
leapfrogged. Every
Yeah.
year you got
Longitude,
higher up the scale of.
Because your opening now to grab the reader is that this school is unique.
Mm-hmm.
And it did something that, quite frankly, other schools around you weren't able to do.
Mm-hmm.
And it becomes that, again, I'm throwing the word out, ethnographic, of you saying, look at this school, and then as you're talking about the before and after, you're bringing in the data to support that.
Mm-hmm.
This is becoming the citation of your study. Then you're going to talk more about, not only are we talking about growth, but we're going to also interview people to show what were some of the nuances that changed this school
Right.
to be such a success. Now, somewhere you have to also talk about, as the principal left, this is the question that we can have later on, to start beginning to show the decline. But the question is in your interviews is maybe asking one or two questions, what caused maybe.
I don't know if the data says that. Data might show differently.
Okay,
But I
let's
know
stay
that,
with
but
that.
no. But
They're not as
no.
happy. You're saying that the people you talk to aren't as happy
The people are
like they
saying
were.
that the programs that existed no longer have existed. The
Right.
enrollment has dropped from 1,500 to 900. Teachers have left the school, and there's a general lack of morale. And
Right.
So
that was
that could
one
be
of the things
like
that
you
is in the
talked about.
is in the
Yeah.
topic. You know,
Yeah.
transformational teacher
And
morale.
I'll make this observation, enrollment decline is rarely associated with, except when leadership is problematic, is rarely associated with demoralization. Enrollment decline, fewer kids to deal with, actually is supposed to improve the climate, right? Because, you know, the more kids you have in the class or in the school, the more kids you gotta worry about, right? And so that becomes.
But in this regard, it does, because enrollment decline means excess of teachers. You understand?
Oh, sure.
If you have 1,500
Of course that's-
students, then you need more teachers.
Right.
If enrollment declines,
You gotta
I don't
fire
work here no
people.
more. You gotta go.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so people, job security
That's
being
true.
put
Well, that's
into,
true. That's fair.
being put
That's
into
a fair
an
response. Yeah.
ATR pool
Yeah.
and all these
Yeah.
things.
That's right.
That's the
That's a
big,
decline.
it's a big
That's
issue.
right.
Yeah,
That's a good point.
yeah.
Anyway, but so I mean, I'm excited. I mean, I've always been excited about you doing something about the school. I just,
Yeah.
as you could see, I wasn't happy with what you.
Well, that's why I wanted to have the meeting,
Yeah,
because
yeah.
I think we all I wanted to pull it together so we can be on the same
Absolutely
page.
right,
You
right.
have data. Now you need to really comb through it. Now you have secondary data too, because you have the newspaper clips that
Yeah, I
you can
have
talk
some,
about. Yeah, but you
And
can also say.
that's what I want to talk about in terms of citing it, because I have like, for example, I have, the Hip Hop Project was in the Tribeca Film Festival, and there's articles about that. And in the articles about that, they talk about not just the film, but they talk about the school and how it transformed.
Yeah.
And then there's the Vibe magazine, which did a whole big piece on how I use hip hop in education. But I know what you're gonna say. But no, before you go there, listen, it's not even about the hip hop. What they say in this article about improved attendance rates,
Right.
you know, demonstrated academic performance, and they're quoting 9% and raise and this and that, and this is in
That's your
publications.
secondary that you can use.
So, you know, I'm not saying just for the hip hop piece, but it was a perfect, I was gonna zing you with that one. But it's a perfect way of showing that these assertions are coming from from other
Right.
places.
That's the
You know,
point. That's so
So
much the
the
point.
question, sir,
Yes.
is when I'm writing my chapter 1 and I'm including this data,
Yes.
some of the assertions that you talk about,
Right.
should I be looking at some of these articles and citing what they're saying about the
They
leadership
should
in the
be
school?
cited from the article,
Yeah.
not from your head.
Yeah,
So
I got
you-
you. I got you.
So there could be quotes.
Yeah, so I'm saying I
Yeah.
can quote and say,
Yes.
okay,
Yeah.
all right, so yeah, but I've just been.
I just find that you have, when you just came in, you had this thing of data, and you and I were talking about this. He has so much research.
Right.
That it's just taking you time to figure out how to put it all together.
I didn't know where to put it. I didn't know, does it go, when do I talk about it? That was my thing.
But you're
Yeah.
talking about this school on the hill, and you're gonna talk about the before and after, before
Is
you
this what I
arrive.
think it is? Is this the St. John Fisher proposal guidelines?
No.
All right.
Oh, I have them.
I want
But I've
you,
read the guidelines.
read them again.
Okay.
Because if you read them again and digest them, you'll see why a lot of my comments are what
Okay.
they are.
And
When you're writing, leave it to the side. I'm not making a line of this. I just did a defense on Monday. I had to go back to the St. John proposal because people aren't, it's almost like APA. I know you got APA down, but you got to memorize all this stuff.
Yeah.
Because once you memorize it, the writing will come
It
easier.
flows more easily, that's
It
exactly right.
comes easier.
Totally right.
If you do it solo without that in front of you, it's going to be, you're going to feel the tension in your writing.
Okay.
That is just easier template.
All right, so just for my clarity,
Yeah.
we're gonna keep it ethnographic.
Yes.
We're gonna look at the we're gonna look at the stakeholders.
Data, and you're going to
We're
create
gonna,
tables.
we're gonna create tables.
And quotes.
And quotes.
Yes.
Got it. And are we keeping the dissertation topic the same, right?
Yeah, it's the same.
Transformational leadership. No, because I heard stuff about, Fulton's work or other change theorists, but we're still sticking with
Well,
the
for right now,
primary
I
example.
I tell you, I would, I mean, I think after you get done.
Yeah.
And have done your chapter 1, 2, and 3, and we're all.
Look at it again?
Then,
We can look at it.
then look at the time, because I think it's gonna, your writing is gonna change your mind about what the title should be.
Yeah.
That's what I believe.
But I'm still keeping that basic transformation
Yes,
leadership stuff there, that's what I'm saying,
yes.
okay.
You're still using
And I'm
the
using
keyword.
Fulton, because one of the things Fulton says.
Okay, now he's into fully. This is your
Yeah.
expertise.
No, but one of the things that Fulton says is that, when he talks about change process, he talks about having a plan
Right.
and ongoing professional development and being able to foresee where you need to go in terms of expansion
Right.
of programs. But
Why
one of
don't
the
you
things that he
talk for a minute?
says.
I'm gonna scoop by you, don't move.
Okay. He says, he talks about how leadership is important.
Right.
And so I was thinking, okay, here I am looking at OVO and Bass and transformational leadership, and then I'm looking at what Fulton is saying about,
Shango, all you have to do, as I recall now, is tweak your transformational leadership writing and insert the
Fulton.
Fulton stuff.
Okay.
And you're golden. Because
Okay.
what you've got there is you've got the overarching theory,
Okay.
and then you've got the education change theory, right? Right?
I got it.
So, and if you do that, you could knock that out in a weekend.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm really glad we've done this, because
It's long overdue.
Okay.
And part of, you have to understand, I feel like, and it's probably reflected in the writing,
Right.
but I have felt like, like I'm bipolar, because
Right.
I'm trying to address.
right, I
When I
understand.
first started,
Right.
it was all about hip hop and education.
Right.
Dr. Kelly said, no.
Right,
When I look at what you're doing, you're really talking about transformational leadership, and you're talking about what you did at the school. Right from that perspective. So then I shifted.
right.
And so what I'm trying to do, and so
It's both.
yeah, it is.
Because
But-
the truth of the matter is, look, the writings you got and the stuff you'll get from kids and their parents and maybe even teachers is that your passion for hip hop influenced a lot of what you did as principal, and as I said before, and influenced some view of curriculum and probably the pride some of the folks
So how do I-
felt about the school.
How do I embed that into one of my questions
Well,
without getting too far off?
You don't, because it's a more general question. The question is,
So I'm going to ask a question without influencing. You understand what I'm
well,
trying
but
to
again, you're gonna be interviewing people, so you're gonna have a billion questions that you're gonna use when you're interviewing somebody. The research questions, one is gonna be about the fidelity to the theoretical framework, right? I mean, you gotta figure out what language, but fidelity to the theoretical framework. And the other is what the stakeholders think about, or you could even say, I mean, you might have each, what do students think, what do parents think, what do teachers think? You might have 3 separate questions. Or you might just make it one. What do stakeholders, comma, students, parents, and teachers, comma, believe were the causes of improved achievement and the relative growth in the comparative status of the school during the tenure you were principal. I mean, it may just be you have 2 questions, or you could have 5, but with 3 of them being the same, only a different stakeholder.
How many? What do you think is a manageable number in terms of the amount of stakeholders? How many people in each group?
369.
If you're gonna
with 3 in each, 3 or 4.
3 or 4 in each.
Right.
Yeah, you
Because
can do that.
you're going to be looking also at, and it's not a content analysis, but you're going to be looking also at familiar themes that you're going to be pulling out.
Right, what they're saying.
Yeah, so you don't want to do 20.
Yeah.
People like to have these large numbers, and I want you to think about what that means on your floor when you're having interviews, transcribe, and you're looking for common themes or even opposing thoughts. You know, in vitro will be your in vivo. I don't know what that. I said in vitro. I know.
In vivo. She's tell us something.
I'm telling you, I need to go to bed soon. But you really need to pay attention. And sometimes if you're going to do a really good interview, you can interview 3 people
And get in-depth.
and get really in-depth, good quality research. The more numbers shouldn't matter. Good quality interview should matter.
That's right.
And I would be doing a purposeful sampling,
Yeah.
right? And my justification would be that it's because these people were actually there at the school
Absolutely.
Yes.
during the time.
Yes.
Okay.
Right.
Okay. So you have it. It's now time for you to just sit down and really figure out how you're
Okay.
putting this together.
And what you have that's much different than what you've written so far, forgive me, but I want to make
Yeah.
sure that we're, what you have and what gets me so excited about this conversation is that you've got all this evidence.
Yes.
You've got the outcome data, which wasn't here before. I mean, you've had assertions about the outcome data,
Yeah.
but you don't have the outcome data,
Okay.
right? Now you got the outcome data. You've got newspaper articles and, that comment positively on what's going on at the school, which you don't
And I
have.
can write all about that in the narrative.
Right, right.
Absolutely.
That's right, and so I think you got it now.
Yeah.
You just got to not spend the time. Do
Yeah,
it.
I'm good.
Okay.
You know, one of the, I told Dr. Kelly a long time ago that I've been sitting on this data. I got all this data, but I didn't know where, when, how, or when to introduce it. But now, if you're telling me talk about it up front in chapter 1 to set
Yeah.
the stage for the
Grab us
study,
and bring us in.
that makes sense.
I mean, we built a constitutional successful lawsuit that I think I
Yeah.
talked about, the Abbott case, which got the best remedies in the country based on data, based on exactly the kind of data that we're talking about, showing the gap between what the suburban schools are able to produce and what the urban schools are able to produce, and showing that there's obviously a link between the resources available to the wealthy suburban district as opposed to the poor urban districts. And that was the fundamental case that we built.
Okay.
So, I've lived this stuff for years, and that's why I'm excited about where we are.
Now, just one last question, because I wrote about it in chapter 1 in significance of the study about Common Core, Race to the Top, right? Now, recently, and I just want to know how to, from an APA standpoint, I wanted to cite these things and bring it in. There's a lot of, I was getting excited because there's a lot of discussion going on right now.
Right.
About principals. I think de Blasio is going to create this CompStat, like he has the CompStat for the police, he's going to create CompStat for schools.
Okay.
And so they'll have real live data about what's happening in each school in real time, and the principals who, let's say, have
That
a drop
sounds
of...
like chapter 5.
That's what chapter 5?
That's chapter 5.
That's
Okay.
exactly what I was going to say.
Okay, because I didn't know if I should talk about that.
No,
Hey, okay,
no,
wait.
No, because that's another
Chapter
study.
5.
Okay.
That's
That gets you another study. No,
That's okay.
you stay with, you got a school
Okay.
that's improved over 4 years,
Okay.
with you as a leader, why?
Yeah,
Right,
that's
so
it.
chapter 5, okay.
That's it.
Right.
That's chapter 5.
Because I want to be able to position this at the end for journals and what have you.
I know, but
Okay.
Totally
We'll stay
agree.
like this
Exactly
for
right.
right now.
Right,
Okay.
that's right.
But I'll just keep on cutting out those clippings though.
There you go.
Okay.
Yes, yes.
All right.
so this is good. We're going to do it again, and you're coming on board for teaching, so we can do this a lot of Fridays to get it all done.
So there were other things in your, so there were other things in your agenda.
Oh, so here's the thing.
Oh, the success plan. you got,
Yes.
right?
Well, I'm going to table that for right
Okay,
now,
all right.
because I think we're on a good start. I don't want to get into success and everything. What we'd like to do, just chapter 1, is could we have that in 2 weeks? Could you check your calendars?
I'd like to give it to you earlier than 2 weeks.
Well,
but-
you know what? My students always say that, and then they ask for 2 weeks. So I'm going to give you now 1 week.
Okay.
Hold on. Janice has learned to use a phone. She's just tired. So how is it's the 10th? How is 17th?
17th is fine for me.
That's a week from today.
That's on Friday?
Yeah.
Um,
Okay. How are you? Just getting it. You don't have to be
Oh,
here.
getting it?
Yeah.
Oh,
I'll submit it by the-
Oh, sure,
Yeah,
sure,
submission.
sure. Yeah, yeah.
Okay, so then that it is. Chapter 1, that's all we want to see.
Right.
Tables, graphs, secondary, that's it. And then we'll move on.
And make sure you follow the damn outline in the Fisher guidelines, proposal
Okay.
guidelines, okay?
Could you check to see for April 24th, which is a Friday? I'd like to have him, after he submits that, us have another meeting, either the 24th or May 1st, it's up to you, to talk about two things. Finishing his lit review, IRB, defense, and there's a third thing.
The new IRB committee.
And the new IRB, and talking about how to submit your IRB. So after he submits chapter 1, I'd like to have another face-to-face meeting.
I would like, I'm pretty flexible, and my preference would be, before committing to a date, we could certainly set a tentative date.
Okay.
I want to see what you produce.
Okay, so-
And how we react to it.
So can I do this? After he submits on the 17th, we can, after we read it, we'll give ourselves a deadline, and then we could do a
The
telephone.
weekend, I'm happy to just
Okay,
say or whatever.
so let's look at, I'll try, but no later than the 21st, we'll do a telephone conference to see where you are.
I can do that.
And start moving you for chapters 2 and 3.
Okay,
So we can set up the proposal defense.
okay.
Okay? So you and I will talk either the 20th or 21st, which is on Monday or Tuesday, after we receive his chapter 1.
Yeah.
And then we'll start moving you forward.
Okay.
Okay? This was a productive, face-to-face always wins.
With everybody in the same room.
We have to. I don't
All right.
like.
Good stuff. Okay. I'm happy for you.
Please do me a favor too. Make copies of all that.
Yeah, I am.
Okay.
My plan was, you know what my plan was? I was gonna get here early, make copies, give it to you.
Okay.
But then I was like, oh, I got time. I thought I was
You should
meeting
have
at
copies
4.
just someplace to
Shango.
store it.
Oh, no,
One thing
I,
we haven't done, it's the Joe Clark stuff. Joe Clark is a fraud.
give it to
Really?
me. Okay, I'll check it out.
Read that first.
Okay.
Okay, and then
Hey,
there's
Andy,
a
read
longer
it.
article, and then there's an article, no, there's the article about him as the warden of a juvenile prison.
Okay.
And then there's a much longer article from an author who's actually written a definitive story about, study about Union City, New Jersey, which is actually the best of the urban districts
Okay.
over these years. Anyway, but look, particularly read the top article.
Okay.
And you'll see why I'm
Yeah, I'm gonna read it, because I know you're passionate about
I'm
this.
really passionate. This guy is a fraud. And I want you to see what the other evidence is besides the superficial Reagan administration evidence. And I think I said that, you'll get a kick out of this. The Reagan Secretary of Education, who was the big proponent of Joe Clark, was my best friend in college,
Oh, no.
Wow.
William Bennett.
Oh, yeah, William Bennett, yeah.